The style of this work, meaning the Rambler, has been censured by some shallow critics as involved and turgid, and abounding with antiquated and hard words. So ill-founded is the first part of this objection that I will challenge all who may honor this book with a perusal to point out any English writer whose language conveys his meaning with equal force and perspicuity. It must indeed be allowed that the structure of his sentences is expanded and often has somewhat of the inversion of Latin, and that he delighted to express familiar thoughts in philosophical language, being in this the reverse of Socrates, who, it was said, reduced philosophy to the simplicity of common life. But let us attend to what he himself says of his concluding paper. When common words were less pleasing to the ear, or less distinct in that signification, I have familiarized the terms of philosophy by applying them to popular ideas. Yet his style did not escape the harmless shafts of pleasant humor. From the ingenious Bonald Thornton published a mock Rambler in the Drury Lane Journal. And as to the second part of the objection, upon a late careful revision of the work, I can with confidence say that it is amazing how few of these words, for which it has been unjustly characterized, are actually to be found in it. I am sure not the proportion of one to each paper. This idle charge has been echoed from one babbler to another, who have disconfounded Johnson's essays with Johnson's dictionary, and because he thought it right in the lexicon of our language to collect many words which have fallen into disuse, but were supported by great authorities, it has been imagined that all of these have been interwoven into his own compositions. That some of them have been adopted by him unnecessarily may perhaps be allowed, but in general they are evidently an advantage, for without them his stately ideas would be confined and cramped. To quote the Idler, "He that thinks with more extent than another will want words of larger meaning." Johnson once told me that he had formed his style upon that of Sir William Temple, and upon Chambers's proposal for his dictionary. He certainly was mistaken, or if he imagined at first that he was imitating Temple, he was very unsuccessful. For nothing can be more unlike than the simplicity of Temple and the richness of Johnson. Their styles differ as plain cloth and brocade. Temple, indeed, seems equally erroneous in supposing that he himself has formed his style upon Sandy's view of the state of religion in the western part of the world. The style of Johnson was, undoubtedly, much formed upon than that of the great writers in the last century. Hooker, Bacon, Saunderson, Hockwell, and others. Those giants, as they were well characterized by a great personage, George III Crocker, whose authority, were I to name him, I just did, but that was a bracketed footnote, would stamp a reverence on the opinion. I don't know why Boswell just doesn't name him there. We may, with the utmost propriety, apply to his learned style that passage of Horace, a part of which he has taken as the motto to his dictionary. Now, what follows is a very long thing in Latin. This time I'm going to skip it because it would be a waste of time for me to read the entire Latin. So I'm just going to read the translation of the Latin. When he takes his tablets to write, he will take also the spirit of an honest censor. Any words that he shall find lacking in dignity, or without proper weight, or that are held unworthy of the rank, he will have heart of courage to degrade from their position, however unwilling they may be to retire, and bent still on haunting Vesta's precincts. Phrases of beauty that have been lost to popular view he will kindly disinter and bring into the light. Phrases which, though they were in the lips of a Cato in a Cethegus of old time, now lie uncouth because out of fashion and disused because old. He will admit to the franchise new phrases which used fathered and given to the world. In strength and clearness, like a crystal stream, he will pour his wealth along, and bless Latium with a richer tongue. So that was from Horatio? Is that? I don't know. A letter from Horatio. It's from Pistol 2. But that is also the motto of Johnson's dictionary. To so great a master of thinking, to one of such vast and various knowledge as Johnson, might have been allowed a liberal indulgence of that license which Horace claims in another place. Oh, so that's Horace. Oh, yeah, that's right. I said that already. Duh. I don't know why the... Anyway. So now what follows is another Latin, long list of Latin, like this long. So I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read that in bad Latin this time again. So I'll be reading the translation again. If so be there are abstruse things which absolutely require new terms to make them clear, it will be in your power to frame words which never sounded in the ears of a cinctured Scythicus, and free pardon will be granted if the license be used modestly. New words and words of yesterday's framing will find acceptance if the source from which they flow be Greek, and if the stream be turned on sparingly. Think you that there is any license which the Romans will grant to Catullus and Plautus, and then refuse to Virgil and Varius? Why should you grudge, even such as one as myself, the right of adding, if I can, something to the store, when the tongue of Cato and of Ennius has been permitted to enrich our mother speech by giving to the world new names for things? Each generation has been allowed and will be allowed still to issue words that bear the mint mark of the day. That's a translation of Horace again. You know, I have been taking Latin on Duolingo, but I'm not that proficient yet. It only goes up to level 3 anyway. I know a lot of stuff about drunken parrots. That's about it. Pistico ibri, I think it is. Citico ibri. Anyway. Yet Johnson assured me that he had not taken upon him to add more than 4 or 5 words to the English language of his own formation. And he was very much offended as the general license by no means modestly taken in his time, not only to coin new words, but to use many words in sense quite different from their established meaning, and he was frequently very fantastical. So he wouldn't like when people say, I literally said that, I guess. I'd not be a fan of that. Sir Thomas Browne, whose life Johnson wrote, was remarkably fond of Anglo-Latin diction, and to his example we are to ascribe Johnson sometimes indulging himself in this kind of phraseology. The observation of his having imitated Sir Thomas Browne has been made by many people, and lately has been insisted on, and illustrated by a variety of quotations from Browne in one of the popular essays written by the Reverend Mr. Knox, master of Turnbridge School, whom I have set down in my list of those who have sometimes not unsuccessfully imitated Dr. Johnson's style. That's faint praise. Johnson's comprehension of mind was the mold for his language. Had his conceptions been narrower, his expressions would have been easier. His sentences have a dignified march, and it is certain that his examples has given a general elevation to the language of his country, for many of our best writers have approached very near to him. And from the influence which he has had upon our composition, scarcely anything is written now that is not better expressed than was usual before he appeared to lead the national taste. This circumstance, the truth of which must strike every critical reader, has been so happily enforced by Mr. Courtenay in his Moral and Literary Character of Dr. Johnson, that I cannot prevail on myself to withhold it, notwithstanding his perhaps too great partiality for one of his friends. And now I will read probably another bad poetry thing from this time period where everything rhymes and it's pretty lame to me. But here we go. By nature's gifts ordained mankind to rule, he, like a Tatian, formed his brilliant school, and taught congenial spirits to excel, while from his lips impressive wisdom fell. It's like a Hallmark card. Our boasted goldsmith felt the sovereign sway, from him derived the sweet yet nervous lay. To fame's proud cliff he bade our Raphael rise, hence Reynolds' pen with Reynolds' pencil vies. With Johnson's flame melodious Burney glows, while the grand strain in smoother cadence flows. And you, Malone, to critic learning dear, correct and elegant, refined, though clear, by studying him acquired that classic taste, which high in Shakespeare's fane thy statue placed. Near Johnson Stevens stands, on scenic ground, acute, laborious, fertile, and profound. Ingenious Hawkenworth, to the school we owe, and scarce the pupil from the tutor know. Here early parts accomplished Joan sublimes, and science blends with Asia's lofty rhymes. Harmonious Jones, who in his splendid strains sings Camdeo's sports on Agra's flowery plains, in Hindu fictions while we fondly trace love and the muses, decked with added grace. And these names call him Boswell be forgot, scarce by North Britons now esteemed a Scot, who, in the sage devoted from his youth, imbibed from him the sacred love of truth, the keen research, the exercise of mind, and that best art, the art to know mankind. Nor was his energy confined alone to friends around his philosophic throne. Its influence wide improved our lettered style, and lucid vigor marked the general style. As Nile's proud waves, swollen from the oozy bed, first o'er the neighboring meads majestic spread, till gathering force thy more and more expand, and with new virtue fertilize the land. Footnote here about Boswell mentioned in this poem. The following observation in Mr. Boswell's Journal of a Tour of the Hebrides may sufficiently account for that gentleman being now scarcely esteemed a Scot by many of his countrymen. If he, Dr. Johnson, was particularly prejudiced against the Scots, it was because they were more in his way, because he thought their success in England rather exceeded the due proportion of their real merit, and because he could not but see in them the nationality which, I believe, no liberal-minded Scotchman will deny. Mr. Boswell, indeed, is so free from national prejudice that he might with equal propriety have been described as Scarth by South Britons now esteemed a Scot. That's a footnote from Courtenay. A lot of racism against the Scots and Irish back then. Or whatever you want to call it. Prejudice, I guess. Johnson's language, however, must be allowed to be too masculine for the delicate gentleness of female writing. His ladies, therefore, seem strangely formal, even to ridicule, and are well denominated by the names which he has given them, as Misila Zazima, Properentia, Rondoclia. I'll pay anybody $100 if they name one of their children one of those names. It has of late been the fashion to compare the style of Addison and Johnson, and to depreciate, I think very unjustly, the style of Addison as nerveless and feeble, because it has not the strength and energy of that of Johnson. Their prose may be balanced like the poetry of Dryden and Pope. Both are excellent, though in different ways. Addison writes with the ease of a gentleman. His readers fancy that a wise and accomplished companion is talking to them, so that he insinuates his sentiments and tastes into their minds by an imperceptible influence. Johnson writes like a teacher. He dictates to his readers as if from an academical chair. They attend with awe and admiration, and his precepts are impressed upon them by his commanding eloquence. Addison's style, like a light wine, pleases everybody from the first. Johnson's, like a liquor of more body, seems too strong at first, but by degree is highly relished. And such is the melody of his period, so much so do they captivate the ear and seize upon the attention, that there is scarcely any writer, however inconsiderable, who does not aim in some degree to the same species of excellence. But let us not ungratefully undervalue that beautiful style which has pleasingly conveyed to us much instruction and entertainment. Though comparatively weak, when opposed to Johnson's Herculean vigor, let us not call it positively feeble. Let us remember the character of his style, as given by Johnson himself. What he attempted he performed. He is never feeble, and he did not wish to be energetic. He is never rapid, and he never stagnates. His sentences have neither studied amplitude nor affected brevity. His periods, though not diligently rounded, are voluble and easy. Whoever wishes to attain an English style, familiar but not coarse, and elegant but not ostentatious, must give his days and nights to the volumes of Addison. I shall probably, in another work, maintain the merit of Addison's poetry, which has been very unjustly depreciated. But for now, let's go back to the Rambler. Though the Rambler was not... I'm ad-libbing here. This is not something... That's not something... You know. Whatever. Though the Rambler was not concluded till the year 1752, I shall, under this year, say all that I have to observe upon it. Some of that were still in 1750. That's why he's saying that. Some of the translations of the mottos by himself are admirably done. He acknowledges to have received elegant translations of many of them from Mr. James Elphinston, and some are very happily translated by a Mr. F. Lewis, of whom I never heard more, except that Johnson thus described him to Mr. Malone: "Sir, he lived in London and hung loose upon society." The concluding paper of his Rambler is once dignified and pathetic. I cannot, however, but wish that he had not ended it with an unnecessary Greek verse, translated also into an English couplet. It is too much like the conceit of those dramatic poets who used to conclude each act with a rhyme, and the expression of the first line of that couplet, "celestial powers," though proper in pagan poetry, is ill-suited to Christianity, with a conformity to which he consoles himself. How much better would it have been to have ended with the prose sentence, "I shall never envy the honours which wit and learning obtain in any other cause, if I can be numbered among the writers who have given ardour to virtue and confidence to truth." His friend Dr. Birch being now engaged in preparing an edition of Raleigh's smaller pieces, Dr. Johnson wrote the following letter to that gentleman. To Dr. Birch. Go Square, May 12th, 1750. Sir, knowing that you are now preparing to favour the public with a new edition of Raleigh's miscellaneous pieces, I have taken the liberty to send you a manuscript which fell by chance within my notice. I perceive no proofs of forgery in my examination of it, and the owner tells me that, as he has heard, the handwriting is Sir Walter's. If you should find reason to conclude it genuine, it will be a kindness to the owner, a blind person, Mrs. Williams is probably the person meant here, to recommend it to the booksellers. I am, sir, your most humble servant, Sam Johnson. I feel like I should start ending letters now with, I am, sir, your humble servant. That was common back then. His just abhorrence to Milton's political notions was ever strong. But this did not prevent his warm admiration of Milton's great poetical merit, to which he has done illustrious justice beyond all who have written upon the subject. In this year he not only wrote a prologue, which was spoken by Mr. Garrick before the acting of Commas at Drury Lane Theatre, for the benefit of Milton's granddaughter, but took a very zealous interest in the success of the charity. On the day preceding the performance, he published the following letter in the General Advertiser, addressed to the printer of that paper. Sir, that a certain degree of reputation is acquired merely by approving the works of genius, and testifying a regard to the memory of authors, is a truth too evident to be denied, and therefore to ensure a participation of fame, and with a celebrated poet, many who would perhaps have contributed to starve him when alive, have heaped expensive pageants upon his grave. It must indeed be confessed that this method of becoming known to posterity with honor is peculiar to the great, or at least to the wealthy. But an opportunity now offers for almost every individual to secure the praise of paying a just regard to the illustrious dead, united with the pleasure of doing good to the living. To assist industrious indigents struggling with distress and debilitated by age is a display of virtue and an acquisition of happiness and honor. Whoever, then, would be thought capable of pleasure in reading the works of our incomparable Milton, and not so destitute of gratitude as to refuse to lay out a trifle in rational and elegant entertainment for the benefit of his living remains, for the exercise of their own virtue, the increase of their reputation, and the pleasing consciousness of doing good, should appear at Drury Lane Theatre tomorrow, April 5th, when Comus will be performed for the benefit of Mrs. Elizabeth Foster, granddaughter to the author, and the only surviving branch of his family. N.B. Note bene. There will be a new prologue on this occasion, written by the author of Irene, and spoken by Mr. Garrick, and by particular desire there will be added to the masque a dramatic satire called Leith, in which Mr. Garrick will perform. That old ham. He didn't say that old ham, I did. Anyway, that's the end of that year, 1750. So that's a good place to stop. Starting in 1751 tomorrow when Johnson will be 42. Till next time, bye from Boswell.